That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Glorias, the latest film directed by Julie Taymor, which premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival and will be available to stream courtesy of Amazon Prime September 30th, 2020. Ostensibly, this is Julie Taymor's first narrative theatrical feature since 2010's The Tempest. In between there, she had a filmed version of her staging of A Midsummer Night's Dream. But really, it's been a decade without a Julie Taymor film. So I was excited to see this.
Oh, I'm glad. It's a very straightforward biopic about Gloria Steinem, from her as a young girl until current times.
It's based on Steinem's own memoir, My Life on the Road.
So that component's very straightforward. What's interesting and where the title comes from, The Glorias, is there's a device that's employed throughout the film where we find the character of Gloria at the different stages of her life. So like young Gloria, adolescent, young woman, middle-aged woman, and current age Gloria on a bus traveling together and sort of discussing their lives amongst each other. Mm-hmm. So where to begin?
I think a statement you made that I felt was very true was it feels like a film that somebody who's very creative had carte blanche, and then the studios kind of chopped that up with some cliche.
Yeah, so the Glorias on the bus device is very interesting.
It is, I agree.
In addition, there are some very, I don't know the word except like sort of extravagant, weird scenes interspersed that we'll get into. So those show a lot of, what's the word? Like inspiration. Like clearly there was some inspiration behind the approach of this story. But then, yeah, it just feels like someone said, you need to tell all her life, like literally from point A to point Z. And it feels very long. It is long.
It is 2.5 hours, but it feels even
longer.
And it's just curious that we had to include all aspects of Gloria Steinem, who is otherwise shown as being kind of a very blunt, straightforward person. So I think it would have been better to focus on one with maybe some flashbacks to the others that are very minor. But
I will say the most sort of engaging components of the film are the live, like actual footage that is incorporated. Mm-hmm. Also, at the very end, we see Gloria Steinem, the actual person, speaking at the Women's March on Washington. Mm-hmm. So this film made me just want to see a documentary about Gloria Steinem and maybe have her sort of speak throughout about sort of critical moments in her life. And I'm sure, it does feel like someone just turned a movie into a book.
A book into a movie?
I mean, a book into a movie, yeah.
She did produce it. Taymor is a very important director. She started out in theater, obviously The Lion King, and she'll have a special place in my heart forever because of Titus from 1999. But did Frida and Across the Universe and The Tempest, which I remember dragging you to at the Lagoon Theater and we're not happy about.
Wait, which movie?
The Tempest.
I don't remember that.
With Helen Mirren as Prospero.
Oh, no.
And Russell Brand.
No.
Oh, he blocked that. He was very, very unhappy after.
Why?
I didn't
like it.
Hated it.
Oh. Well, I don't hate this movie.
No, and she brings kind of her visions from the theater and employs them in narrative cinema in ways that sometimes I think are sublime, as in Titus or Frida even, but not so much here.
Well, here, quickly tell. So the film begins with her as a young child, and the main point of that is like her dad is kind of like a Rolling Stone.
Timothy Hutton plays her father.
Played by Timothy Hutton. He's a very, he is a dreamer. He's not going to be relegated to like a 9-to-5 kind of job.
He's in antiques. He roams around the country shopping for antiques that he can sell at a greater price.
So we find their family constantly having to move, constantly in financial despair. However, he's very supportive of his daughter, and they seem to have a lovely, if not unhealthy, relationship because he's not present. The father ends up leaving the mother. Mm-hmm. Early on in the film, we sort of get a scene of young Gloria meeting like a young black girl.
I was going to set that up. Our conversation about that differently, but go ahead.
Oh, well, then let me stop. Then we move on to where I think the film should have started, when Gloria gets her first job, like for a magazine or a newspaper?
New York Magazine?
New York Magazine. And the scene is interesting because she approaches the editor saying, like, I want to write. And he's like, oh, well, women do the research, men do the writing. And Gloria says, well, why don't women do the writing? And his response is, you're right, why don't they? I'll let you write. Which I thought was super corny, but an appropriate starting point. I think all of the life we see before then seems kind of like redundant. Because if you know who Gloria Steinem is and you know her life's work, we don't really need to understand where she came from. I mean, she clearly is sort of an altruistic, mindful, progressive thinker. Like, we don't need to kind of understand that, like, her dad kind of let her do what she wanted to do, and she liked black people.
She wanted to emulate him, and
So then, we just go through a lot of her works. Sort of the biggest component, or I think what she's probably most known for, is Ms. Magazine, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that kind of... Well, and then her article about the Playboy Lounge.
Well, that's kind of started off her career about the Playboy bunnies, which, of course, there was a movie starring Kirstie Alley made about that in '85, A Bunny's Tale.
Okay.
Yes, but she was afraid of being pigeonholed because they wanted to commission a whole series, and she had no interest in doing that. But how that crafted, because Gloria Steinem was also a beautiful woman, and how that affected her trajectory is also ingrained here, and she didn't want any part of that.
Because even before we see her seen as becoming a writer, we see her traveling through India, and
that's
kind of her having exchanges on a train with these Indian women, and they're asking her, like, you're like a white woman from the United States, why aren't you like in the first class club car? And she's like, no, that wouldn't feel like India. Like, because I want to be around you poor bitches. And then they say, well, why do you want to be here with, like, she's like, because I want to be around you all because you're so great. That just, again, seems superfluous. Like, we kind of know where this person's heart is. I don't know. Anyway, we get sort of the ubiquitous, like, where does she get her glasses from? So then there's a scene of that is obviously necessary, right? Like, it would be like a biopic about Bill Clinton, and at some point you have to explain how he started playing the, what instrument did he play? The saxophone? Anyway, then... I thought another corny scene was the
glasses scene was corny, not because we have to see her picking it out, it's because of the accompanying dialogue. Oh, Gloria, those glasses are too big for you and they hide your beautiful face. They're perfect.
And they're perfect.
Okay, yeah.
And then we transition into her father is sick.
Yeah.
So she gets a call saying dad's sick, but she's on her way to do a big story. So she has to delay her trip like a week. Mm-hmm. So when she finally gets to the airport, she gets a call saying, like, dad died. Mm-hmm. But she still travels back. And when she goes to see the doctor who took care of him, he kind of chews her out. Mm-hmm. Like, your dad was here for a week. Why weren't you here? Like, fool, you don't know us. Maybe he was awful to me and I'm glad he's dead. Right. But anyway, the film doesn't, for me, really pick up until... Well, there's a scene where Gloria goes to get an abortion.
Yes, it's in London and on her way to India.
Right. And I think when the doctor says, he tells her, you have to promise me two things.
Well, because abortion was illegal then.
Right, because abortion was not legal. You have to promise me two things. You will not tell anyone about me, and you will do what you want to do with your life. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like, even that would have been such a powerful start to her story. Like, so that was a good scene. But I wrote down at the hour 15 mark, that's when the film kind of came alive, because Lorraine Toussaint hops up on the scene.
As Flo Kennedy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she just brings all the sort of pizzazz that the film was missing prior to her. Mm-hmm. Which, great for Lorraine Toussaint that she always delivers. And I do like her, but I'm not biased. Like, she really is, that character's charismatic. And, you know, also the young woman, because Julianne Moore, you know, Julianne Moore's transfixing in any role.
You're talking about Alicia Vikander, the Oscar winner.
Who I don't know, and she's beautiful and did a fine job, but I think, you know how people say like, oh, you should wear the clothes and let the clothes wear you. I feel like she let this role like overtake her acting skill because she seems so focused on sounding like Gloria Steinem.
Yes, she's trying to. It becomes caricature when she's trying to speak like Steinem. Her she had a very recognizable speech pattern.
Yeah. So then so once we hit Lorraine Toussaint and then her involvement with these women and Ms. Magazine, then we get another nice bump because then Bette Midler hops up on the scene. And she's this very charismatic Jewish woman who was running for city council.
Bella Abzug.
Yeah, so then that adds another little bit of life to it.
And in there you get Janelle Monáe as Dorothy Patterson Hughes. Dorothy Pitman Hughes.
Janelle Monáe is great. I like her. She doesn't have much to do.
She doesn't have much to do. She does feel a bit underutilized.
Yeah.
But again, it's at this period in Steinem's life where really the film also starts to come to life as well.
Yes, well, because then we get more Julianne Moore then.
Mm-hmm. And Julianne Moore does much better with the accents and presence, and it's like that's who I wanted to see more.
And also when we get the scene on the bus with the Glorias, at that point in the film, all of the Glorias are on the bus. Mm-hmm. Because initially, it's kind of going in chronological order. So when we first are introduced to the bus concept, it's just the younger girl. So initially I was thinking, oh, the young girl's traveling somewhere. But it doesn't build up until towards the end when all of them are on the bus. And that's when I think that device works better. Mm-hmm. So getting to the weird, sort of extravagant moments, there's a famous scene when Gloria Steinem is being interviewed and the male interviewer is just asking her like the typical stupid questions men ask women about not being married and why does she dress so sexy? She doesn't want people to see her as a sex symbol.
He's being lecherous, yeah.
Yes. And it turns into like Wizard of Oz, the tornado scene with the witch and it took my breath away and I can't even say if it's good or bad. Like I was in shock because it's so off the wall. Do you agree?
I was in shock.
We were looking at each other like
speechless for a few minutes because it doesn't, in context, it doesn't play well. Out of context is just the clip, perhaps interesting, but positioned where it is there.
And it's supposed to represent perhaps what's going on in her mind as this man is asking her these inane questions, but
then we have to have that more. That needs to be an established pattern. They do that again with more where she's like running on the road and it's like a treadmill. But also that feels clunky too.
Well, so then what you're referring to is she is in a cab headed somewhere and the cab driver is being sort of like racist to some pedestrians.
He's a Ukrainian immigrant.
Right. And he's belittling some black people walking across the street and Gloria like digs into him. Like, why that's wrong and who do you think you are and I'm not going to tolerate this. Let me out of this cab. So she gets out of the cab and then we get another sort of psychedelic scene where, like you said, it's like one of those MC Escher portraits where she's on like treadmills.
Several levels of treadmills at the road and she's about to fall off.
Again.
Signifying that her work will never be done.
Will never be done. And I just thought like, in context, out of context, it just felt so like...
See, now when Taymor approaches Shakespeare, I really like those, her aesthetic there and those visuals that pop. But when you're telling a biopic of someone
whose character is very flat.
She is, right? Yeah.
Like the characterization of Gloria Steinem was very flat.
Who's continually commenting on how flat she is.
Right. So then to add these colorful sprinkles seems very against her character. That could have been her inner like dialogue, and maybe in the book she talks about her inner rage and her inner creativity, but in the film it doesn't translate well.
I agree.
Okay. Then the third weirdy kind of moment is when they start Ms. Magazine and weirdy. I'm not sure how I would spell that. With an E or just a Y.
I think I do an IE, but...
Well, when they're deciding on the first cover for Ms. Magazine, they have that sort of, what's that character with all the arms?
The Indian goddess...
The blue lady with all the arms, which is a beautiful symbol and makes for a beautiful magazine cover. And the sort of graphic illustration that's done is also beautiful, but it just does not match the tone of the person who we're focusing on.
I agree.
My last note was that I think, again, I would much prefer to see a documentary featuring Gloria Steinem talking about her own life, and then we get actual footage referencing those moments. And she provides us with anecdotes. Like, I would have much preferred to hear, like, show us a clip of that interview, and then have her talk about what she was thinking.
Because I don't think she's flat. I think she's very deadpan. I think she's very droll. I like listening to her.
Yeah.
And just all the other documentary footage that is woven in here.
Yeah.
Like you get Mahalia Jackson. Like those all seem to kind of come to life in ways that the film feels a bit inert.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? There is. I think it's also important to note that we haven't watched it, but the Hulu series Mrs. America with Kate Blanchett playing Phyllis Schlafly, who is only shown in footage here. Betty Friedan, I don't think is even shown in footage here, but of course is mentioned. She has a whole series, really, in her relation to this, and Rose Byrne plays Gloria Steinem.
Well, but I think when we talk about like the feminist movement and women's rights, and there's so many, like I feel like it could be like a 20-part documentary series about the advancements and all the people involved, and I'm sure Gloria Steinem would agree that she is not she shouldn't be the focus. Like, it should be the work of all these groups and all of these women. So
I agree, and that's the thing too. The Glorias, she's a pretty static person who's pretty well aware of who she is as a human being throughout her life. Not that she's static and not that she didn't grow, etc. But to have this mechanism used seems kind of weird. Like this seems what I hope Madonna and Diablo Cody are trying to approach Madonna's life with in that biopic. Because
that's a good point, because I feel like someone like Madonna, at least from the public's perspective, she needs a device like this. Like all the creativity and all the phases she's been through that are so eccentric and over the top. We need someone to say like, okay, but we need the story. Start from the beginning to now. I feel like a format like the Glorias would work better for someone with a little more inconsistency. But yeah, she's very Gloria Steinem. The way this film presents her, she's very sort of true to herself and solid in her path forward.
And really, she was able to shine a light on all these other extraordinary women. Like Wilma Mankiller, I think is also an important figure here, and was somebody I kind of enjoyed learning about. There's some conversation she has with Julianne Moore. It's Kimberly Guerrero playing her that I did kind of find fascinating. The point I wanted to go back to was one you brought up as we were watching it.
Oh, right.
It's where Lulu Wilson is playing Gloria as a teenager, and we are treated to this scene where this very friendly, affable young black girl takes her into her father's barber shop to give her a tap dancing lesson.
Yeah. So my comment on that was, I feel like oftentimes with white characters, fictional or not, who sort of have a more progressive, liberal, open-minded approach to life, it always seems necessary that we explain where that comes from. And to me, it feels cheap. I think that this, and I don't know Gloria Steinem, but I'm assuming like her life work speaks to her true self. So I don't need her to tap dance for watermelon in a black barbershop or whatever the fuck she was doing to demonstrate that like her compassion for all people. Like her actions spoke for itself. So I don't have a problem with the scene, except I think it's corny.
I agree that it's a superfluous scene because this is where Gloria Steinem learned that black people were human. Is that what we're supposed to think of it? Because there are plenty of young white girls that grow up to be terrible racists that knew black people at some point in their life that were nice to them. So that's not the point. So then it's like, I don't think we need that at all, because how she presents herself to the world as somebody that was a proponent of lesbian and trans rights and black people's rights is apparent in plenty of interactions in this film, especially in the Julianne Moore segment, where she doesn't want to be photographed as a white woman on the magazine.
Right.
Where she's aligning herself with Dorothy Pitman Hughes and Flo Kennedy. And there's another scene. They even make a point of showing her being interviewed and somebody talked about the feminist movement leaving out women of color, what would you say to that? And she said, I would just listen.
I wouldn't say anything. I would just listen. Yeah.
And then is it Cynthia Bailey's ex? They show her dancing with at one point.
Yes,
too.
Leon Robinson, who's not credited in IMDb, but he should do more.
I don't think he has a speaking role.
He does that.
But all of those things, why you wouldn't come away thinking like, oh, but where did that come from?
You know what it makes me like? It's not negative, and I think it could be handled better because it just feels like the requisite, like we got to include something. But it makes me feel like when you ask like a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or a firefighter, like, why do you do what you do? Because they want to help people. Like those careers are obvious, and I think someone like Gloria Steinem, her life's work doesn't need. It just feels cheap to include little bits.
If
like
you
that.
don't have a profound response to those kind of questions, then you don't have one, and it doesn't bear needing to take up time and space, at least in this very long film.
What would you give this film?
2.5 out of 5. If I was gonna watch the Glorias I'd rather see are Sebastian Lelio's films, Gloria and Gloria Bell, the latter of which does star Julianne Moore.
I would give it 2.5 out of 5 as well. Thank you.
Thanks.